Thanks again for coming. This is the rededication for the Wavell's colony marker that was originally established here in 1969. And we'll kick it off with opening remarks from Mayor Bruggeman.
Thank you, Matt. Looked at my watch. Good afternoon. So it's officially afternoon. I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the city to thank you all for coming out on this beautiful fall day as we celebrate the rededication of a historical marker noting the Wavell's colony, first organized settlement in this particular region of our area. And I hope everyone had an opportunity to get a copy of the handout here. A lot of very, very good information in here. And so we're just excited today to be here together to talk about the rededication of this marker. And so at this time, I'd just like to share with you some very, very quick bullet points relating to the topic at hand. The first marker, this is the second, but the first marker was dedicated in 1969. And it was located at the former Howard Johnson Hotel, which was located at the intersection of Interstate 30, Highway 71 / North State Line Avenue. So that's where it was originally put to mark that site. However, the marker was reported to have been stolen sometime during the year 2015, which happened to be the same year that hotel complex was torn down. So it happened, those two events happened in the same year. I don't know if they were related to each other or not. Mr. Wavell was notable for recognizing shared regional history across Bowie County, Texas, and Miller County, Arkansas. Arthur G. Wavell led an eventful life as a soldier of fortune, a miner, and an impresario. Wavell is credited with helping Stephen F. Austin secure approval for Anglo settlements in Spanish and later Mexican Texas. His colonization efforts produced some of the earliest surviving records of settlers in this area, which many current residents can still trace as family roots. And as a part of that, I understand this afternoon we have representatives here from the Aiken family as well as the McKinney family, which represents descendants of this colonization that began here. If you're a member of the Aiken family or the McKinney family, would you please raise your hand? Okay, well, very good. We're glad to have you all with us today. This concludes my remarks, and once again, thank you for being here as we celebrate this rededication of this very, very famous marker. So, Matt, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
So we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance to Texas, and then follow with the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States. These are both printed in your bulletin on page 3. And we'll start with the Texas flag here. Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to thee. Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. And to the United States flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So now's the fun part, because I get to tell you about Arthur Wavell. Arthur Wavell is an incredible character, as the mayor was just mentioning. He was a soldier of fortune, or a mercenary, as I like to call him. He was a Scots-born mercenary or soldier of fortune. He actually fought against Napoleon. And so he spent a lot of time in the service of Spain, and he found himself in Chile, where he was a general in the Chilean army, and he worked his way up to Mexico, and then traded his Chilean military leadership position for a Mexican military leadership position. Remember, this is all while Chile and Mexico and Spain really kind of were really working their way through South America. And so Spain had a lot of interest in the New World, and Arthur Wavell was a leader and a representative of that. And in his travels, he got to meet Moses Austin, and they had you can imagine they're in the New World, and two guys from similar backgrounds meet, and they immediately hit it off. Well, Moses Austin wasn't able to finish his effort to coordinate to get settlers into Spanish Texas, and Stephen F. Austin picked this weight up after Moses Austin passed, and he immediately found Arthur Wavell in Mexico City, and Arthur Wavell is credited with helping Stephen F. Austin, who had no idea about the inner workings of Spain and then Mexico's government. But Arthur Wavell, who'd been living as for all intents and purposes, a Spanish citizen, he knew all the ins and outs of it. So he immediately started helping Stephen F. Austin. In fact, he even allowed Stephen F. Austin to live in his house while he was in Mexico City, trying to work out all the ins and outs. So Arthur Wavell was a critical part of starting Texas. And although Stephen F. Austin gets credit for it, Arthur Wavell was a big part of that. In fact, he liked this Texas adventure so much that he resigned his commission in Mexico and settled and set off back to the United Kingdom and England to recruit settlers into Austin's colony. And he left Mexico City with $1,700, which you can imagine back then would have been a whole lot of money, and paperwork, bona fides, if you will, to try to recruit settlers in. But his ship got pirated in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico, and so he arrived in England and wrote back to Stephen F. Austin saying, "Hey, I'm here, I'm working for you, but I have no paperwork, I have no money, and any help you can give me is greatly appreciated." And what's really cool is we actually have these letters back and forth between Stephen F. Austin and Arthur Wavell, and they reside at the University of Texas in Austin. And so he's helping Stephen F. Austin, and Austin's having his own trouble. He's in and out of prison. He's worried about revolution. I mean, he's a citizen of Mexico, so he's trying to work this thing out. And Arthur Wavell, who's helping him, says, and remember, he's a mercenary, so he's going to go where the money's at. And he says, "Hey, I'm working for you. I really hadn't been paid yet. Maybe I ought to start my own colony." And Austin told him, "No, don't do it. I might die in prison or broke or both." And Arthur Wavell said, "No, I'm gonna do it anyway." So he petitioned Mexico to start his own colony, and he was assigned what would become Red River County, Bowie County, and Miller County. So the border at that time was really kind of a gray area. Go back in time a little bit to 1803 when Thomas Jefferson and the United States bought the Louisiana Purchase. Spain and France never really agreed on the border between New Spain and New France. And so when the United States bought the Louisiana Purchase, they immediately said, "Hey, we got to figure this out." So they invited representatives from Spain to come to Washington, D.C., and the Secretary of State at the time, who would soon become President of the United States, John Quincy Adams, and the ambassador from Spain, a guy whose last name Onias, met in Washington, D.C., and signed the Adams and Onias Treaty of 1819. That created what we now call state line. But you can imagine the 32nd parallel where we're standing at now would have been in the woods and very hard unless you had survey equipment to tell where the border was between the United States and Spain. So the treaty was signed in 1819, but Mexico became a country in 1821. And so in 1821, Mexico said, "No, we're not going to do this 32nd parallel thing in the middle of the woods. Rivers make really good borders, so we're going all the way to the Red River." And so that's where you get Wavell's colony incorporating parts of Miller County, or all of Miller County, because rivers make really good borders. Now, at the end, ultimately, when Texas got its independence from Mexico, you had more American-friendly citizens of the Republic of Texas, and they immediately set out to, "Hey, we got to have good borders, good friends," and so they reestablished the border from 1819. But Arthur Wavell and Wavell's colony were a big part of our regional history, as well as United States and Texas history, and for that matter, Arkansas as well. Arthur Wavell's good friend, who's mentioned on the marker and in the pamphlet, Benjamin Milam, was a resident of Bowie County and was responsible for recording the very first settlers here. And we still have those books, and many of you that are with us today can trace your family roots back to the book with Benjamin Milam's handwriting, recording who was there, how many acres they had, and this was all in an effort to get land titles. And so Wavell's colony, an incredibly important part of our history. One last thing about Benjamin Milam. We don't think of our connection to what happened in San Antonio and the Alamo. We think of that very loosely. But Benjamin Milam, who, as I said, recorded all the early settlers in this area, would eventually link up with the Texas Army, and on their way into San Antonio in 1835 to initially take the Alamo. It was December, it was cold, and the armies back then, hey, we got to settle in for winter. It's going to be long and hard, and we're going to do some training. And Benjamin Milam said, no, we got to take it now. And so on December the 2nd, 1835, he stood up and said, who will follow old Ben Milam into San Antonio to take the Alamo and to take San Antonio? And so that battle is called the Siege of Behar, and in that siege, 300 Texans stood up and said, we'll follow old Ben Milam into San Antonio, into the Alamo. Unfortunately, the Texans were successful in removing the Mexican soldiers from the Alamo in San Antonio and establishing the base at the Alamo. Unfortunately, Benjamin Milam lost his life in that battle. But again, he was from here. He recorded all the people who were settled here. And so his ties to Wavell and Wavell's colony were very significant. It's mentioned on the marker, and I wanted to share that with you. Really, really cool parts of history. These markers are not only to remind us about who was here before us, but it's also to remind us about the promise and the potential that they saw in this land. Reading about Arthur Wavell and his opinion about the land that was here and the people that was here, they envisioned, they had great visions for what this community would become. And these markers remind us about not only the people that were here first, but our inheritance of their vision of who we could be and should be. And so as we look at these and we unveil this marker, it's about the history, but it's also about who we can be as a community, as a people. And so I really appreciate y'all coming. Jeremy, you want to come up and help me remove the flag here, and we'll do a reading. On the back of the pamphlet is the marker, and so as Jeremy is untying it here, pull the string right here, Jeremy, the flowers will fall off. And you can just set them right here. And then you can pull that off. All right, projected in 1826 by General Arthur G. Wavell, a Scottish-born soldier of fortune. By terms of a Mexican grant, he agreed to introduce 400 to 500 families into an area on the Red River. Ben Milam, frontiersman, was agent. Many pioneers were actually brought in, but because Mexico and the U.S. disputed part of the grant, no titles were ever issued by Wavell. Some settlers, however, later received titles from the Republic of Texas. The colony included virtually all of present Bowie, Red River counties, and Miller County, and possibly others to the west, 1969. That concludes the marker part. I'll turn it back over to the mayor for any closing comments.
Well, I just want to say once again, I want to thank you all for coming out this afternoon. It's so great that we're able to reestablish a marker like this, specifically at this location. We have a lot of people from around the country, from other countries, and as a matter of fact, who come here to our photographer's island each and every day. And so if I'm driving around the federal courthouse building and I'm not in a big hurry, which is not real often, but if I'm not in a big hurry, then sometimes I will stop, I will introduce myself, and I'm always curious to find out where they're from. And so two common places I hear a lot are people who come here from the Houston area and people who come here from the state of Tennessee. But I've also met people from other countries who have been traveling through here either by family or with a group. And so as they have their photograph taken, oftentimes they will do some local exploring. They will read these other markers and monuments and things like that. And so I think it's great that we have another addition to allow us to be more familiar with our roots, where we came from this particular area, and to have the opportunity to share this with others, both now and in the days and months and years to come. So on behalf of the city, once again, thank you all very much for coming out this afternoon, and I certainly hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you very much.